I'm sure by now a lot of you have seen The Batman. By box office numbers and critical reception, we can safely say that Robert Pattinson's version of the Caped Crusader is a bit of a hit, creating a whole new personality for impressionable young men to download in hopes of them getting the goth GF they've always dreamed of. The Batman is, by most accounts, a good movie. I loved it, I'm sure you did too, and alongside the excellent performances of its heroes, the villains of the Batman really do help make it as great as it is, with Paul Dano's Riddler now giving me a new fear of small Twitch streamers. The Batman keeps itself as a compact, complete story though. It finishes itself by the third act, rather than leaving things ambiguous. With the Riddler safely locked away, we know that a possible sequel will introduce a new major threat. We may have already seen that new threat in the form of Barry Keoghan's Joker, who appears in a post-credit scene that all but confirms he will be at least heavily involved in a Batman sequel. Now, the Joker is great, but I don't want to see him in the Batman sequel. At least, I don't think he should be the main villain of that sequel. I mean, doesn't it feel like we've seen enough of the Joker over the last few years? In the last 5 years or so alone, we've had Joaquin Phoenix and Jared Leto on our screens with brand new iterations of the character. Both of these actors were attempting to reinvent the Joker after Heath Ledger's success, with one attempt bombing, while the other is hailed as the king of all incel movies. If anything, the more recent Joker success will make the act even harder to follow, as now you've got Phoenix's and Ledger's performances to beat. Of course, a potential sequel to the Batman could be years away, allowing the hype of even the 2019 Joker to die down somewhat, but you've got to remember that the websites, YouTube channels and other things that follow a film during its production stages will constantly be giving you information on plot happenings, schedules, castings, etc, etc. This means that even if we have to wait until 2025 to see a new Joker face off against Robert Pattinson, we will have had next to no break from the character due to a constant stream of Joker speculation. To include the Joker now would just oversaturate an already saturated market, honing down the Batman's diverse rogues gallery to one guy with green hair and lipstick. Also, as a bit of a side point that's more to do with DC films in general, doesn't the Joker film of 2019 just seem a bit pointless now? Like, if you're not setting up Joaquin Phoenix's character for anything besides his own setup as the Joker, then why even make the film? It's even more pointless than the Cruella and Maleficent spin-offs, because at least those films are technically just prequels to the old animated Disney movies, whereas the 2019 Joker isn't a prequel to anything, it doesn't set up anything at all. Anyway, that's besides the point. I also don't think we should see Barry Keoghan's Joker yet, because, to be blunt, it could just suck. Think about Jared Leto and how we all had to take the copium of, oh, he's just doing his own spin on it, I mean it kind of works, when it was really just the worst thing we've ever seen. Keoghan is a talented actor, and I'm sure he can do the role justice, but even so, that won't stop some fans from thinking that he stinks because the Joker on the silver screen is so closely tied to Heath Ledger. No one on screen so far has done a better job portraying the Joker against the Batman than Heath Ledger. I don't care about Phoenix's performance because he didn't have to do the hard part of standing out while sharing the screen with a Batman that was over 10 years old. Considering the tragedy around Ledger's death and how so many have tried and failed to really match the actor's performance, I think it's about time we moved on from the Joker, at least on the big screen. Paul Dano's Riddler was a brilliant, insane character that did feel similar in terms of his presence to that of the Dark Knight's Joker, so it is possible to have a Joker-like character without just playing on the recognisability of the Clown Prince of Crime. By not trying to top Ledger and throw in the Joker for the sake of him being the most famous villain, we can see some other top-tier Batman villains and how they'll look in the gritty world Matt Reeves has made. There's already some big names that have been set up through the Batman film, like the Penguin and Bane. I'll admit, Bane doesn't really have a proper reference in the film, and it's a bit more of a looser cameo in the slightest tease through the adrenaline injection that Batman gives himself at the end of the third act. The Penguin, though, does feel like the natural successor to the villains we see in the Batman, as his arc isn't fully completed by the time the film is over, and he's ready to step up to take the place that the other villains leave behind. Filling the power vacuum left by some of Gotham's leading mobsters, the Penguin could pose a real threat to Gotham and the Batman, and oh boy would I love to see Colin Farrell in that makeup again. Well, I hear you say, if the Penguin is our main villain in a possible sequel, wouldn't that just focus the film on organised crime again? The Joker can bring in wacky stuff, not just Goodfellas wannabes. Yeah, I get that point, I completely understand it. However, I don't think the Joker is our natural answer to this. There are plenty of other Batman villains that could offer an entirely different challenge to the Batman in a possible sequel. There's Bane, who I've already mentioned, Clayface and Deathstroke, who could all equal Batsy physically, posing an entirely different fight than the mental one the Riddler provides. And then there's characters like Mr. Freeze and Poison Ivy, who could grant a distinct threat to Gotham, with some possible tragic villain backstories thrown in. Personally though, I'd love to see the Court of Owls manifest themselves on the big screen. That would really be like nothing we've seen before in a Batman movie. And though it would be a risk, bringing the Joker back is also a risky move, as I've been talking about for the past 5 minutes. Using the Court of Owls is a risk because it's something new, something that only comic fans might be familiar with, whereas using the Joker is something that has been done a lot and done very well already, meaning you're going to have to top it to make anything worthwhile. Now, I'm not saying here that if the Joker does appear in a potential Batman sequel that it'll be bad. I definitely don't think they should scrap Keegan or his character, but I'd like to see the Joker come in at perhaps the end of a Batman trilogy, rather than be the middle piece yet again like he is in the Dark Knight trilogy. The Joker should be your biggest threat, and so a Batman sequel should work towards making him that, instead of using the Joker as the main villain, show him working towards being the Clown Prince of Crime. In my opinion, the Joker should be more of a background character in the Batman sequel, kind of like he is in the first film, and he's just sort of waiting for the Batman to create that perfect power vacuum where he can step in. With how Matt Reeves, Robert Pattinson, and all the others involved have managed to create such an impressive reboot of everyone's favourite eyeshadow-wearing superhero, I don't doubt that they'll be putting in the time and effort to ensure the Joker's appearance will be done right. You know, I even like the fact that they kept the Joker's deleted scene out of the original film too, as it would have just kind of been a cheap cameo that would have lessened the Riddler's presence, while making his own role in a sequel less of a surprise. The Batman pulls off having 4 major villains from the comics. Yes, I am including Catwoman, by the way, in that list of villains, because in the comics and in most of the media she is usually working against Batman in some form. And even with 4 major villains, the Batman doesn't feel overly loaded with baddies, so it would be entirely possible for a sequel to have one large main villain while quietly building the Joker in the background. Do I think the Joker will actually take on a smaller role in the Batman sequel? No, I think he'll be our major villain. I think mostly he'll act like the Riddler does, being the wacky counterpart to what will likely be the Penguin's grab for power over Gotham's crime hub. Even though I think a potential Batman sequel could be more interesting, at the end of the day, Matt Reeves knocked it out of the park with this first hit, and I'm sure he'll do it again. I still want the Court of Owls though, maybe one day. Thank you ever so much for watching, you're a real star. Please do like and subscribe wherever you can, and I'm sure I'll see you again soon. I just realised I winked, but I don't have a camera set up yet, so you just have to take my word that that happened. Goodbye.